Welcome to OLC 4.0. This is Term 1A. Today is class 24. We're going to be working on assignment 34 and then assignment 35. It says here 1 to 3, but I think we're actually probably only going to get to, well, we might get to 3. I'll leave that there, I guess. And we're going to be working on quotations. Today is Wednesday, October 16th, 2024, and I am Jillian Percy. Here is all our contact information. If you're wanting to call in while I'm on the studio, 1-800-465-7144. If you want to talk to me after class, 1-800-667-3703. If you want to reach out to me on Facebook, capital G, capital P, ERCY, space, capital WAHSA. I am also on YouTube. I have a channel there, which I will show you in a second. If you are submitting work, please send it to studentwork@nnec.on.ca. If you're worried about it not being seen, you can also CC it to me, jillian.percy@nnec.on.ca. But this is the most reliable way because then the secretary sees it, she logs it. Always make sure that every assignment has on it your full name, the course name, the assignment number, and the name. Not just on the file or in the subject line of the email if you're sending it that way, okay? Because I don't necessarily see the email gets printed off and put in my mailbox. I only see the actual paper. So if your name and the assignment number isn't on there, I won't know what it's for, okay? Always include the rough and the good draft if it is required for the assignment. You don't have to hand me in the rough draft if it doesn't require it, right? Sometimes there's no marks for the rough draft. If it's like short answer stuff, like you're answering questions about a novel, then you probably don't need to be sending me in the rough draft, okay? If you're not sure, send it, but always make sure you label it, okay? Rough draft, good draft. You never need to send me in your brainstorming. I never need to see that. Okay, here's my YouTube channel. And as you can see, I'm not in my my home tab, I'm in my playlists tab. If you are in the home, just the most recent things will come up. Whereas if you come to the playlists, everything's organized by the course. Okay, and I usually have them in order from the first class down to the last class. This is this term's class, which we only have, gosh, about 2.5 more weeks left. All the rest is stuff from last year. It, however, can still be useful to you. If you're ahead of where we are right now, check out Term 2B or Term 2A and you can find previous information. I'm about to start doing English 4E in the next term, but there's some stuff here in case you're already taking 4E. You can also find the stuff on the new WASA YouTube channel. Okay, this is a new thing this year where beyond our individual channels, we also have a group one. And right now it has all the playlists from this year only. Okay, nothing from previous years, but this year only. So if there's any courses that you're taking this year, rather than having to go to our individual playlist, you can just go here and it will have everything included. So that's kind of cool too. Okay. So I've got my learning goals kind of all at once today because of just the way we're tackling things today. Quotations are a huge part of assignment 35. So we're not tackling them first, we're kind of tackling them in the middle. So I'm just kind of diving right in today. All right, so our very first thing is I can demonstrate understanding that reading is an active process of thinking and constructing meaning. I can demonstrate understanding the purpose of reading or the requirements of the reading task influence my approach to reading a text. I can demonstrate understanding that writing is a process that involves a range of thinking and composing skills. I can demonstrate understanding that the subject, audience, and purpose for writing influence my choices of form, tone, and level of language. I can also construct personal reflections in paragraph form, choosing a clear focus and using appropriate examples to explain my thinking. So we're tackling a lot. Just a quick reminder, learning journals, right? Sometimes people are kind of like, why do we have these? First of all, it's a curriculum requirement, right? For this course, I have a whole list of things I'm required to teach. Having an ongoing learning journal is an important part of that curriculum step. Second, the big focus is you becoming aware of your growth in your reading and writing skills through self-reflection. It's a way for you to think about the topics we're talking about and write down your ideas, which there's a lot of studies that prove that that's usually a really good way for people to what they call consolidate their learning. In other words, it helps you remember your learning better because you've reflected on it and written about it. Third, it's intended to give you ownership of your own learning so that you become kind of your own teacher because you begin to develop the ability to evaluate your own skills and evaluate your own progress. Okay. The big focus for this one is the idea that students are going to demonstrate an understanding that the subject, audience, and purpose for writing influences their choice of form, tone, and level of language, and also can affect how you read things. Okay. So this isn't meant to be busy work. It's meant to encourage the process and practice of self-reflection. So here is the revised version. This used to be slightly different. This is the new one for this year, okay? All about text concepts. It's worth 15 marks. You've just spent some time thinking about subject, audience, and purpose. Hopefully you've also noticed a thing or two about tone, form, and levels of language. So we talked about in the last few assignments. It's time to kind of put it all together into a journal entry. So here's your journal prompt. In your opinion, does understanding more about text concepts such as subject, audience, purpose, tone, format, and levels of language help you in reading texts or in writing texts of your own? Be sure to follow good paragraph structure with an opening and a closing sentence. Your body sentences should explain the reason for your opinion and give specific examples to support each reason. Your paragraph should be at least 8 to 10 sentences long. Your audience is your teacher. Your format is an opinion paragraph. So you're giving me your opinion on these things. Your purpose is to give me your opinion and the reasons for your opinion. I'm gonna rephrase that. Remember that there's three main purposes. Your purpose is to persuade me to share your opinion. Okay, I'm gonna put it that way. To share with me. No, to share, persuade me to share your opinion. Yeah. Okay. And the reasons for your opinion. Okay. Your audience, purpose, and format should influence your language level and your tone of writing. Remember that language level is your vocabulary, but also your sentence complexity. Okay. So text topics. Some of the topics we've just been studying are subject, audience, purpose, tone, format, levels of language. You want to make sure you touch on all of those in your paragraph. We use these understandings of these concepts to help us when we're reading. We also use these concepts to help us communicate our ideas better to our chosen audience. So one really important thing is to give reasons or examples as evidence of your opinion. Here is a possible example discussing the concept of vocabulary. Now, I'm actually not asking you to discuss vocabulary per se. It's kind of part of level of language, but I chose this because it's not one of the main ones I've asked you to discuss. So I think that understanding the concept of vocabulary can be important to understanding reading. Okay, that's my opinion, right? Now I've got to back it up with reasons or examples. For example, a novel could be hard to read because it uses a lot of medical vocabulary that I might not understand or need to look up in a dictionary. On the other hand, being mindful of vocabulary might help my writing because I can make sure to write words everybody can understand if I'm trying to reach a wide audience. On the other hand, again, I don't know if I might change that if I was going to do this over again. If I was trying to explain something about mining to a group of miners, I wouldn't have to worry about explaining any special vocabulary that only miners would understand, right? So that's my example. I gave you examples, I explained further, I gave details. I didn't just tell you my ideas, I explained the reasons for my ideas. That's what I'm looking for in any journal, but definitely in here, okay? Now, there are two main ways I can think of that you could structure this journal. First of all, you could tackle each of these topics as it relates to helping you understand what you read, and then you could handle each of the topics again as it relates to helping you understand how to write. Second way, you could discuss each topic and at the same time discuss how it relates to both reading and writing, and then move on to the next topic, right? When I'm talking about topics, I mean these elements, right? Okay. This is our overall journal. This is the general journal I use for, sorry, the rubric I use for marking just about any journals. It's kind of generic, but it really works for on any level. The big thing to notice is the category, okay? These 5 elements are the big things that you are getting your marks on. First of all is an answer that shows understanding of the question and the journal and the paragraph format. Second of all, I'm looking for relevant details and examples to explain your concepts and opinions. Next, I'm looking for your communication skills. This is your meaning, your organization, your sentence fluency, your tone, your clarity, your transitions, styles. This is basically like your writing skills. Then I'm looking for the application of language conventions. This is the part we check when we're editing. Spelling, grammar, capitalization, punctuation. And last, I've got length. Length meets the minimum sentence or page length as required. I've got this there because I had people handing me in assignments that had like 1 sentence. And there's no real way for me to mark that. There's just not enough information there. So I added it so people can see that length is an important part of doing an assignment, okay? We're looking for a B. B is it meets the assignment length. A is it goes beyond the assignment length. C is it's just below, like if I asked for 6 or 7 and you give me 4, okay. Length is at least half. So if I asked for 6 and you give me 3, okay, fair enough. If it's less than half, that's a failing mark, okay? So just quick say here, let me see if, I don't know if it'll let me, can I dump something in here? Hang on a second. Won't let me dump. Oh, it will, okay. This is where you don't want it. Anything beyond here is a pass. Technically, what we're looking for in Ontario is this part in green. That's what you're aiming for. That's considered a solid B and is the hope that is where most of us can end up at, okay? All right, I wanted to do a little bit of a deeper dive into the rubric though. We've talked about it before, just kind of generally, but there's a lot of key concepts packed into one tiny little statement. So if I'm talking here about the answer shows understanding of the question and journal and paragraph format, that means that when I look at this category, I'm looking at each one of those 3 aspects. I'm looking for, do you understand the question in the journal prompt? Do you understand proper paragraph format? And do you understand how to write in a self-reflective way for the journal? Looking at all 3 of those things. So, understanding the question. Sometimes I'll find students use the question more as a starting point, and then they kind of leap off of it to discuss something completely different. I think that this is maybe happening because you're used to doing journals in school. And in school, a lot of times in journals, the teacher doesn't really care so much what you write. They're just trying to give you practice on writing. I'm doing something very different, okay? What the topic is really important. And if you go off topic, you're going to lose marks. Even if you wrote the most amazing journal, if it's not on the topic I asked for, you're going to lose marks, significant marks. Now, occasionally students appear to misunderstand the topic. Like I thought I was talking about communication skills in the workplace, and someone else thought I meant success in the workspace. That can still result in the same issue. An entire journal can end up on a completely different topic than what is expected. I would read the journal prompts very carefully to make sure you understand what the topic really is. As well, the last problem is sometimes students will handle a topic in a very general or vague way that kind of suggests to me that they may have only a surface understanding of the topic, rather than writing that handles the topic in a far more detailed or deep manner that shows that you have a really good understanding of the topic. Now, sometimes a student may actually understand it really well, but they just aren't demonstrating that in their writing. So it's important not just that you know it, but that you demonstrate. In other words, that you show me that you know it. That's what I'm looking for, okay? Next section, understanding the paragraph format. Understanding a basic paragraph format and how it gets modified slightly with different writing formats is a really major theme of this course. I am always looking for this. anytime I am marking any writing assignment, always. Even a journal can have a good opening sentence to introduce the topic or your opinion on the topic. The majority of the journal writing should be exploring and explaining your thoughts and feelings on the journal topic, and then you should end the paragraph with a good closing sentence that summarizes your ideas or opinions. Forgetting to use this very basic format is going to reduce your marks. So will handing in material that doesn't look like sentence writing. If it looks more like brainstorming, like your ideas have been written in a list or just in like incomplete sentences like jot notes, or multiple revisions where you've written over things and crossed things out and done so much that it's almost hard for me to read it. When you do that, and it's fine that you do that, but then you need to recopy it into a nice, clean format that I can easily understand, okay? When you do a lot of those revisions, because you wrote it, you know what you're writing, but it can be really hard for me to read it, okay? So that's really an important part of this concept. Lastly, understanding how to write in a self-reflective way. This is one of those things that I find people are either they love doing journals or they hate doing journals. Journals can be on a really wide variety of topics, but the style of writing that I am looking for or that is expected in journals is normally pretty similar. Generally, in a journal, they're wanting you to take a step back away from yourself and sort of explain how you were thinking or feeling or using a certain topic or skill. It's almost like you are writing as an outside observer and you're kind of spying on your own thoughts and actions and then reporting it to someone else. And that can feel a bit odd at first. Some people find it makes it really uncomfortable to discuss themselves in that way. Other people sometimes don't realize that everybody thinks a little differently and may approach reading and writing tasks differently. So they often feel like there's nothing to say and they say something like very quick and very brief because like, well, this is obvious. Why is she even asking that? Well, really, because it's surprising how differently people think and approach things. So here's an example. Let's say there was a journal prompt for a teacher and it said, describe your process for planning a lesson. So if I'm uncomfortable or I'm unfamiliar with how to write in that self-reflective, observing kind of way, I might just write down something really short and quick, like, well, I just look at the assignment and I figure out what students need to know, and then I teach that. If I were marking this, I would give that about a D or maybe even a fail. First of all, it's on topic, but it's way too short. It also seems like they either don't have a good understanding of how to write a paragraph, or they may not really understand the topic of teaching planning. But either way, it falls short dramatically. However, it might really just be that some students have kind of a lack of understanding of the type of writing that the marker, which is me, is looking for. So I'm really looking for more details about how you think and what you're doing when you're doing something. If I understood that the teacher is wanting me to do a detailed description of my planning process, I might handle my writing very differently. I might stop and think and kind of in my mind review all the steps I took last time I planned a lesson, as well as all the ways I thought about it. Not just what I did, but how did I think? What are some questions I may have asked myself? What are some standards I may have checked? What are some examples I may have thought about or viewed? How do I organize my lessons? How am I thinking that I'm going to plan to evaluate the learning? Thinking more deeply about my process before I ever start to write can result in a far more detailed answer that more accurately describes my thinking and my planning process. So here is a really long I thing. I'm going to kind of read it through and then I'm going to break down how this shows self-reflective writing, okay? Planning a lesson has a lot of steps to create a successful lesson. First, I look at the Ontario curriculum documents and review the course's specific expectations. Then I decide which ones I am teaching in this lesson. Do I want students to learn a new skill or understand a new concept? Then I might stop and think about how I taught this last year. I evaluate whether those lessons worked well or poorly. I might write down a few ideas or locate my old lessons on the computer. If I feel uncertain or out of ideas, I might ask a teacher friend how they teach this lesson, or I might search the internet for some ideas. Once I have some ideas gathered, I will organize them into my usual lesson sequence and structure, using a graphic organizer to help guide my thinking. It generally has these four main sections: introduction, guided practice, individual practice, assessment. I ask myself a lot of questions at this point. What would be a good way to introduce the main concept? What is a way that we could practice the skill or explore the main concept together as a class or in groups? Could we do a game or watch a video or create a skit as a group? I type out my ideas and see if they make sense for the length of time I have to teach this lesson. I try to decide if the lesson needs to be taught or practiced over several days of classes. After that, I try to plan ways they could practice or demonstrate this skill on their own. At the same time, I think about how I would assess whether they've really learned the skill or understand the concept. I choose a method that is valid and will accurately show their learning. I also design their assessment tool right away. I record my ideas in the lesson plan with enough detail that someone else could teach it if I got sick, but without writing down every single word. Finally, I think about where we're going after this lesson. I ask myself, how will we build on this skill or concept in the next few lessons? Usually, I jot down these ideas while they're fresh in my mind, or I might even start to write them down in my lesson plan template. When I first began teaching, each step took me a long time to do. But now that I have more experience, I may do some of these steps so quickly I barely notice it at all. Okay, so here's what we're looking for. This is actually a little bit long, but it gives me the space to show you what I mean. If I was actually handing this in, I would probably go back through a little bit and actually kind of condense it to make it uh, a little bit less wordy and make sure every single thing is right on point and explained as concisely as it possible. So what are some signs of reflective thinking or reflective writing? First of all, I describe sequence. I get across sequence words and describe the sequence of my actions in the thinking. So I've underlined those. So words like first, then, I've got then again. Once I have some ideas gathered, after that, at the same time, right away, finally. Those are all words that give my reader an idea of what order these steps come in. Now, in pink, I've discussed things that show my internal thoughts. And I've used words like I think, I ask, I wonder, I feel, I plan. So here I've got I decide, do I want, I might stop and think about, I evaluate. If I feel uncertain, I will organize them. I ask myself a lot of questions. I try to decide. I try to plan ways. I think about how I would assess. I choose a method. I think about where we're going. I ask myself. Those are all words where as an observer, I'm describing what I think about. Then in blue, I've got my actions, the things I'm actually physically doing. First, I look at the Ontario curriculum documents and I review. I might write down a few ideas. I might locate my old lessons. I might ask a teacher friend. I might search the internet. Let me see here. I type out my ideas. I design the assessment tool. I record my ideas. I jot down these ideas. Those are all things I'm doing. Now, I also want to make sure I'm using the paragraph format of an opening and closing sentence. Up here, I've got my opening sentence. Planning a lesson has a lot of steps to create a successful lesson. And then I close with, but now that I have more experience, I may do some of these steps so quickly I barely notice it at all. So those are some ways that you can show me that you're reflecting on your thinking and your actions. I was realizing some people might not have a lot of words to describe thinking. So I thought I would put together like a little list here of some possible words that might help you when you're trying to describe your own thinking, okay? So in the first column, I've got words that help describe thinking or planning. Things like think, plan, explore, brainstorm, create, design, generate, envision, consider, or outline. My next column is words that would describe observations. I observe, I notice, I look, I explain, I view, I describe, I record, I note, I report, I detail. Then words that describe questioning. That might be internal questions I'm asking myself. It might be external questions. Ask, wonder, ponder, inquire, research, investigate, interview, quiz, probe, challenge. And then words that might be describing organizational processes, things like select, arrange, sequence, structure, organize, order, shuffle, trade, design, format. Then words that imply that somebody's deciding something or judging on something, things like choosing, prioritizing, reconsider, assess, grade, evaluate, decide, judge, mark, pick. And then words that show you're changing something or you're revising something, things like add on, substitute, discard, move, explore, examine, review, change, alter, correct. And some of these may show up in more than one column because sometimes a word has multiple meanings, right? These are some words that are more talking about actions. The first set is in yellow are these actions that you might do while you're reading. And then in the next section, I've got words that you might use when you're talking about your writing processes. Because again, sometimes people are stuck. They're like, I write, and they can't think of other words to say, or I read. And so I'm trying to give you guys some synonyms that describe very specific parts of reading or very specific parts of writing. So some other things for reading, obviously read, reread, skim. We talked about skimming, scanning, reviewing, notice, locate, highlight, annotate. That's where you make notes down on what you read. Analyze, identify, critique. Critique is like when you're providing a review. Examine or evaluate. And then words that talk about the processes we use when we're writing. Things like brainstorm, draft, write, outline, revise, edit, add, delete, substitute, type, copy, cut and paste, rephrase, shorten, summarize, extend, lengthen, organize, proofread, check, publish, explain, describe, argue, improve, list, detail, and expand. So those are all sort of describing categories of thinking. Now, the next section in the journal rubric is about selecting relevant details and examples to explain your concepts and opinions. These are the ones that these are what I'm really, really looking for anytime you're answering a journal. Okay, and this is jam-packed. Every single one of these words is pretty important. Relevant. Relevant means the details and examples you use are on topic and they do relate to the journal topic and the ideas you're trying to discuss. Details and examples. This part should generally be the main content of your paragraph. You are not being general or vague here. You are giving me very specific examples to prove your ideas, your opinions, or you're adding in details that help support your point. Concepts. If you're trying to explain a concept, some of the journal topics are asking you to show your understanding of a lesson by explaining what you know about a concept and how you might use that concept in your reading and writing. So when you're doing that, you want to make sure that you explain as thoroughly as possible so it's clear to me that you really do understand the concept. So for example, what if a question asked you to explain summarizing? Here, my first example is kind of brief and vague and not really enough information, okay? Summarizing is writing a short version of what you read. I mean, that's true. It's not wrong, but it's just not enough, okay? So here's a more detailed answer. Summarizing is when you write a shortened version of what you read by explaining the main idea or argument, as well as the most important points or reasons. You need to make sure that when you summarize, you've understood the main idea or message and explained it accurately to your audience, okay? It's not different, but it is more detailed, more explanation. That's what I'm looking for when I'm talking about when you're explaining concepts and opinions, okay? Opinions. Some journals ask you what your opinion is about a topic. In other words, they want to know your thoughts and feelings about the topic or about trying to perform the topic. And it's important when you answer questions like that your answers explain your feelings, but you also have to show that you understand the topic as well. That's actually a little bit harder because you've got to show at the same time your understanding and your feelings and opinions. So if I said, in your opinion, do you feel that making predictions is a helpful reading strategy? Explain your ideas. You want to make sure that when you answer, you show me that you understand what making a predictions is, how to do it, and your opinion. It's a little higher level question. So here is 2 examples of a weak sentence, and I'll explain why. The first one is, making predictions is a reading strategy we used in this assignment. Well, you haven't told me your opinion, and you haven't really explained what the strategy is. Like telling me it's a reading strategy isn't really good enough because there's a lot of different reading strategies. That doesn't really explain things. Here's another weak sentence. I feel that making predictions is a very good strategy. Okay, you have given me your opinion, but the way you've written this sentence, I don't have any sense of whether you understand what making predictions is, how to do it, when is a good time to do it. So I wouldn't give you very many marks because you haven't really demonstrated that you understand it. Here is an example that is explaining things a little bit better, okay? And I've color coded this. So the first part is that the opinion is stated right away. In orange is the part where it shows that you understand the topic of making predictions and how to make a prediction. And then in blue is where you're giving me examples and evidence that support your opinion and show that your opinion is based on your understanding of the topic, okay? So here's what this sounds like, and it's more sentences, right? Because it takes longer to explain things really thoroughly. I feel like making predictions has been a helpful strategy to me because it forced me to think about what I already knew about the characters and the plot, then connect that knowledge to my own experiences in order to picture possible outcomes that were reasonable. Okay, so I've given you my opinion and I've explained the strategy. Now I'm going on to give you some examples of how I've used it. And this is another way of showing me that you understand the concept because you're showing me, hey, here's a way that I've used this concept and here's how I found that helpful. Okay, so it's kind of showing that you have a deeper understanding, not just a surface understanding of the topic. For example, when I was trying to make a prediction about what Teresa might do next in the story, I thought about how shy and insecure she seems. And then I thought about how other girls with abusive boyfriends acted when they tried to get back together. That led me to make a prediction that if Jimmy asked Teresa to be his girlfriend again, she would probably say yes, because most girls I know with abusive partners take them back over and over again. So I've given you a really thorough example of how I went through the process of making a prediction. And that shows me, okay, this person, they have an A level of understanding. Now, if you just gave me the first 3 sentences, this part right here, sorry, I can't really even highlight it. The underlined part in the orange, that's probably a B level. But this extra stuff in blue, that's giving you the A because you have really thoroughly explained what you understand, and I am convinced that you get it. Okay, so that's the next thing. All right, so all that's going to go into your journals. Now we're going to be moving on. We are looking at assignment 35. Assignment 35 is huge. I don't know why particularly. I tried to shorten it up a little bit. We will not get it all done today. We will have to discuss some of it tomorrow as well, okay? During assignment 35, you're going to be looking at how to use punctuation marks correctly, especially quotation marks, and how they're affected by commas, periods, question marks, and exclamation marks. You're also going to use your knowledge of how to write news reports to create narratives that relate to other subject areas and personal interests. You're going to use your oral language skills to develop content for writing, and you're going to quote or cite information from sources accurately. Okay, So there is in your unit a whole bunch of background material, and it's really talking about all the different types of nonfiction and fiction. So I encourage you to read it. I'm not going to go over every single bit of it here. That would kind of take us up the next 20 or 30 minutes. Okay, there's a lot to read there. Summarizing it though, the first part is talking about nonfiction. Remember, nonfiction is things that is true. They are not fictional. They're not made up. Okay. They can include all sorts of dialogue or direct quotes of what people say. And some of these types of writing would include things like biographies, autobiographies, newspaper articles, interviews, poetry, informational texts, and historical records and accounts. Now, these will follow the exact same rules about quotations as dialogue and fictional writing. We don't use two different types of rules, okay? I want to make that really clear. Next, fictional writing. There are many types of fictional writing where we do creative writing about imaginary events or imaginary people, and these will also include dialogue or direct quotes of what people say. Some types of fictional writing might include things like legends or myths, short stories, novellas, and novels in a whole bunch of different genres: mysteries, thrillers, horror, romances, fantasy, science fiction, historical fiction. Okay, dialogue. The word dialogue comes from the Greek language. Dia means through, and logos means words. So dialogue is a form of writing that consists of a conversation between two or more people. The most obvious examples of dialogue is a play or a TV show or a TV commercial. And the story is really getting told through the conversation of the characters rather than through a narrator. An ideal example is, you don't hear them as much anymore, but radio plays would also be that, or like radio interviews. There are really specific rules for the punctuation of dialogue. And there are a whole bunch of pages that follow that will give you an overview of the rules, as well as examples of using punctuation with dialogue. The rules about quotations in speech are followed regardless of whether the words are fictional or real and what type of writing format. The only exception are plays, which don't use quotations normally, and certain types of interviews where they would use a colon after someone's name to indicate that they're talking rather than using quotation marks. And we talked about that when we did quotes, okay? But for our purposes here, we're really looking at quotation marks, okay? So this is the most basic part. Quotations often use what is something called a tag. And a tag is where they tell us who is speaking and how they are speaking. Tags can come at the beginning of a sentence, the middle of a sentence, or at the end of a sentence or quotation. So here are some examples at the beginning. He yelled. They capitalized the H for he, and they put a comma after yelled, and then they would do the quotation. She whispered. Again, a capital at the beginning of the sentence, a comma right before the quotation. The principal shouted, the teenager muttered. Same things. In the middle, you don't need a comma at the beginning of the tag because it's not the beginning of the sentence, right? Since it's no longer the beginning of the sentence, there's no need for a capital letter. You do need the comma afterwards because if there's a quote before and a quote afterwards, we always use that little comma to introduce the next quote, okay? Now, if your tag comes at the very end, you still don't need the capital letters at the beginning of the tag because, again, it's not the beginning of the sentence. But you're no longer going to use a comma at the end of the tag. You're going to use a period normally because it's the end of the sentence. There are some occasions where you might use other things, like it's possible but rare that you might say use a exclamation mark to show somebody shouted, but it's pretty rare. It's more likely that that would be in the dialogue, okay? So that's kind of the big basics. Now, assignment number 35, exercise number 1. Now, you know what? I think this is slightly different now. I don't have, well, yeah, there's 3 parts now for 35. I took one of them out, and I don't know if this marks is exactly the same, okay? There are a whole bunch of rules about dialogue in your text. I have not discussed every single one of them here. I'm going to discuss a few of them that I think are really important, okay? In this dialogue, the first 2 that I've underlined, that is where they've done the dialogue for you, okay? For the rest of it, they want you to go through and fix the quotations. And you've got to think about, where are the quotation marks? Where are the commas? Where are the periods, question marks, exclamation marks? They've also left off things like capital letters. So you're going to have to look for those too, okay? We're going to talk about this more. There's 2 pages of this, and this part at the beginning, Kelly and Frank on the phone, you don't need to worry about that part. Hey Kelly, Frank said, what's up? That part's done for you. Hey Frank, I'm just sitting around hanging out, she replied. Also done for you. Now we go on to the part that's not done. That's cool. Did you hear about what happened to Kara? He asked. No, what happened? She asked. Well, he said, I heard she got expelled. For what? She exclaimed. She brought in a knife or something like that, he replied. I bet somebody turned her in, Kelly said. Probably, Frank said. So you got any plans for Friday? Yes, Kelly said. Why? Do you want to offer me something better? I don't know what you have planned, he said, but I was thinking about you and me getting together. And doing what exactly? Kelly asked. I don't know. We could hang out, Frank said. If you don't know, then why did you ask? She asked. Try again when you think of something better to say. So I've tried to use my voice to kind of show you when people are talking and what kind of emotion they're feeling, because that's going to be important for your stuff. Remember, this is really important because occasionally I've had people go through and all they've fixed is the quotation marks. That won't give you enough marks. There's all sorts of things that need to get fixed and that are affected by quotations, okay? So some of the items to be aware of when you're fixing dialogue. First of all, the first word of a sentence and the first word in a piece of dialogue both need to have a capital letter at the beginning of the word. If there is not one there already, you need to change that lowercase letter to a capital letter. So if I look here, it says, wow, he yelled. Okay, I can't just do this, put quotations here and here, because wow is the very first part of the sentence. So I've got to take it from the small letter to the big letter. Then it's okay. You do not need to put new quotes around every sentence if a character is saying several sentences in a row, right? The first quote can count for several sentences. Why? And then they put an end quote because the sentence ended and they started a new quote. But you don't need that. That's incorrect. It's not needed, okay? Just like this, I say why. There's no need for internal quotes because he's still talking. What are you mad about? Then I put an end quote because he's finished talking. Now, if someone interrupted him and started talking, I would need to add quotes there. But otherwise, I don't need to because he's still talking. So it's all the same quote. Not all dialogue has tags, okay? The tags make it easier to help you see that somebody's talking, but sometimes you're going to need to use your reading skills and the context of the sentence to just kind of infer or make a reasonable conclusion that someone's talking. So here I've got, clean up your room, Dad yelled. I hate cleaning up my room. Okay, so clearly, clean up my room is my dad talking, clean up your room. And he's yelling, so I'm going to put an exclamation point. Then I'm going to put my close quote, and then I want to put a period there because sentence is over. Now, it doesn't tell who's talking, but clearly somebody is yelling back at them. So I don't need a tag. I can still put quotation mark to start. I'm going to put another exclamation point because I picture him yelling this. He doesn't have to. You could put something else there, but that's what I'm going to picture. I still need to put quotes around it. Not every form of quotation has a tag. Okay? Okay. Remember that every sentence needs some sort of end punctuation to show the end. If it's missing, you need to add it. Remember, end punctuation is the 3 things: periods, question marks, and exclamation points. Okay, those are the 3 end punctuations. I love pizza, Steve said. So here he's talking, so I'm going to start my quotation. Here he ends it. I'm going to give it a little comma and a quotation. And then Steve said, I'm not finished because my sentence needs an end punctuation. Now, end punctuation that comes inside a quote, like this question mark, but is at the end of the sentence, is often doing double duty. So he asked, are you coming to? And there's a question mark. Because this whole sentence is just a question, I don't need to put a second question here, right? It just looks silly. I don't need to put a period. I don't need to put anything. That question mark, it's kind of doing two jobs. It's ending the sentence and it's ending the quote. I don't need to add anything else to that. Remember, names need to have a capital letter if it hasn't already been capitalized in the text. So here I've got, you're grounded, Mr. Johnson yelled at his daughter, Rebecca. Okay, so Rebecca, it would not be a lowercase r, it would be a big R because it's a name. Now, Mr. and Johnson. Okay, so Mr. is a title or a special type of name, and I would always use a capital M. Same thing for Miss or Mrs. or Ms. or Sir or Madame. Those are titles, doctor, and I always have a capital letter for it. I would also put a capital letter on his last name, right? So before I did anything else, I would make sure those capitals are there. I will be looking for that. Remember also, this is the beginning of the sentence, so it still needs to be a capital. And now I can put my quotation marks. You're grounded, and I'm going to put an exclamation point. Mr. Johnson yelled at his daughter, Rebecca, and then I put a period. Okay. Now, remember, the word I also always needs to be a capital letter because it kind of counts as a name. It stays as a capital even when it's used inside contractions, things like I'm, I'd, I'll. Sometimes I have students who they will use it as a big I when it's by itself, but when they put it in a contraction, they forget and start using the little I. Okay, you need to fix this if it's been forgotten. So here, they've forgotten it. They made it a little I. I need to take that out and make it a big I. And I'm aware sometimes a big I looks an awful lot like an L. I can't really help that. There are some fonts on the computer that make it more obvious and that give it the heads, but I'm not sure which one on in Google Slides. I'm more aware of it with the other ones. Okay, so here's an example. I've kind of shown you a bunch of examples so far. So I think, yeah, okay, we'll go ahead and do this just because of our time. We're running short on time. So for each one, I'm going to look. Okay, first of all, John is a name, so it needs to be a capital. John said, I'm going to put a comma afterwards because I'm introducing my quote. Then I'm going to put my quotation marks. Let's go to the mall. I'm going to put a period because he's finished talking and a quotation mark. And I don't need another period because that period is doing double duty inside and outside. Now I've got no way, said Peter, I don't have any money. Okay, so Peter automatically is going to become a capital P because the person's name. The N is going to become a capital N because it's the beginning of a sentence. So that didn't work right. There we go. Now, where's he talking? No way, said Peter. Okay, so I want to put my quotation mark there. No way. And I could put an exclamation point there, right? Or if he was talking more quietly, I could just use a comma. We don't use a period in the middle of a sentence if the quote isn't right at the very end. It just looks weird and gives people the idea the sentence is over, even though it's just the end of that person talking. So instead, we substitute a comma for that period. No way, said Peter. Now, I could put a period here because he's finished talking, or I could do it as a comma. Either one is totally correct because he's still talking. So I could just do a comma like that. Start a new quote and then do my end quote. Okay. Now, is that where my period goes? No. Okay. I haven't got any kind of punctuation inside my quote to show how the person is talking. Okay. I'm probably going to use a period. It's probably the most common one. Now, I don't need two periods like that, one after the other. Remember, that period is doing double, or not working right there, double duty. Okay, does that make sense? So you would go through both pages and look for spots where they have forgotten um, any type of punctuation and capitals. Those are the two main things that they have forgotten that you want to go back through and look for and fix. It's good practice. Our next assignment, you're actually going to write your own dialogue. So reading this through and correcting it is a good way to get ready for the next assignment. So I thought we were going to have time to talk about it today. We're not. So I'm going to go back here and fix this. We really only get question number 1 today. I'm sorry. We will talk about questions number 2 and number 3 tomorrow, which I believe is Thursday, and then we should be finished assignment 35 for the week. Okay. If you have any questions about this, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk to you more about it and explain it. And good luck with your assignments.